Welcome to Fearless Females, where ambition meets resilience. Meet your guide, Lori Jones, president of Fidelis Wealth Advisors. Join her and remarkable women executives as they uncover the triumphs and transformative moments shaping extraordinary careers. Ready to be fearless? Let the journey begin.
Hey, I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor. We're grateful for Fidelis Wealth Advisors for sponsoring this to let me be able to speak to all these amazing women. So today we're talking with Cindy Grove, and the thing that struck me the most about speaking with Cindy is how far we've come as women in professional services. If you listen to some of her experiences at the beginning of her career, you wouldn't even recognize what happens today as to what happened back then. I know we've got a long way to go, and there's still some changing left to happen and definitely needed. But I found it fascinating to listen to what Cindy dealt with 20 years ago when she started in the industry. So let's get to this. Thanks. Good morning. So we are here today with Cindy Grove. She is the Senior Vice President and Relationship Manager for Mountain View Bank of Commerce. And I'm super excited to have you on the show with us today, Cindy. Thank you so much for joining.
Well, thank you for having me, Lori. I appreciate it. Excited to answer any questions I possibly can. We'll see what we come up with.
I'm sure we got it figured out. So my first question is always, what's your favorite book? I love reading. I've got a ton of books and now as I ask this question, my stack is just ginormous, but what do you love?
Favorite books are hard. And I love asking that of people because I'm in a book club. It is hard to find time to read, no matter where you are in your career or what time in life. So that if you make a commitment to it, that's great. I can't, but I am in love with books because I drive all the time. And so audiobooks are a great way for me to enjoy things that I wouldn't normally listen to. So within the business community, people are always recommending business books. But one that I like is Malcolm Caldwell, Outliers. That was a very interesting book. It's very different perspective. The other one are anything Simon Sinek, and there are books, there are podcasts that he puts out. And I'm speaking to an audience that I assume are professional women who are building upon their careers. There are many books to do and work with there. Give and Take, great book. And I'm missing the author, Adam. And it's on the tip of my tongue and I didn't write it down. But the other one I've read recently is The Alchemist. And it's kind of interesting. It's an old book that popped back up in the book club, wanted to read that. It's a short, quick read. I've enjoyed that one. I think there are many out there to continuously look for the book that fits that moment. During the pandemic, my family and I were stuck for 2 years at home for various reasons and didn't travel or didn't do anything, had the opportunity to go on a beach vacation, reached out to a friend. I said, I want the book that's going to make me laugh the most and be nothing about business. And it was a crazy title, but it was Erotic Stories by Punjabi Widows. But it's a whole book about the Indian culture in London and these widows learning to read and write in English. The title is catchy, but it's a very fascinating whodunit. At the same time, it's also a very endearing story, but it was very culturally telling of how these women live in a subculture within a culture that we're probably all used to living in. It was the perfect book. I enjoyed it. It was a great recommendation.
That's good. Those are great suggestions. I've read, I kind of feel like we're sharing the same brain with The Outliers and the Simon Sinek. I always am trying to channel Simon Sinek and almost, everything I do with leadership, and The Outliers is one that I've read recently. So I'll second the recommendation of both of those. Thank you.
It's fascinating, the 10,000 hours to get good at something. And when you start counting up the hours you've worked at, maybe the one thing you go, I just can't break through. And you realize I'm not even near 10,000 hours yet. So it's like, okay, I got more to go. I can set that goal.
Yeah. And if my hobbies are anything to go by, I I deep dive into whatever it is I'm doing, and then I change my mind about 3 months later. So as far as hobbies go, like my career is set, but my hobbies, I'm all over the place. So
there you go.
So tell me a little bit about your journey. How did you get where you are today, and kind of what do you do? Give me like an abbreviated version. How'd you get there?
Well, first of all, so as you mentioned, I'm with Mountain View Bank of Commerce. I'm a commercial lender. And for those not in the banking world, the first lenders we usually think of or we come in touch with are they either helped us with our auto loan at a credit union or a personal loan. But a big one is mortgage lenders that do personal residential loans. There's certainly commercial real estate loans. What I work on are with small to mid-sized businesses on business loans for business owners. Either they're acquiring, they're getting started, they're emerging. These are operating lines of credit that help them with accounts receivable, inventory, and equipment, along with buying their buildings. But pretty much not a one-off, buy a car, I don't talk to you again until you buy a car in 5 years. This is a cradle to grave where I help businesses that are growing and going through a life cycle. And I've had clients for over 20 years that were going through different iterations of that business and helping them manage kind of a financial planner on the banking side.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I love that you talk about like that relationship that you're building, being like kind of an ongoing one. So how did you know when you were little that you wanted to be a banker?
I don't think anybody goes even to high school, let alone grade school, and says, I want to be a banker. I was probably not even a thought in my mind. I had a roommate in college that actually became a bank teller. And my standard was not fast food. It was working in retail. My career was a different path at the time, but I graduated in a period in a recession very similar to what maybe some here have gone through in 2009. You're coming fresh out of college. There are no jobs. Wages have declined. We're not in a strong economy, and nobody wants to hire you without experience. Nobody wants to pay you, and it's a tough place to be in. So that's kind of, while I had been through some training programs in my field, and I thought it was going to be in retail with large department stores in the buying offices. And that was something I was very interested in San Francisco, California. But it was the comment of, well, nobody was going to take that. That was all constricting. Companies were moving out of California into Arizona, and we came to Colorado, and we came to Colorado to ski. I was looking for something with good days off. If I'm going to not make a lot of money, let's at least have fun. So banks had great days off. They talk about bankers' hours, which are not 9 to 3. They're 7 to 8 at night. But at the same time, it was something that gave me the opportunity to enjoy everything Colorado had to offer, and never intended that that was going to be the long-standing career. However, once I got into it, there were mentors along the way. There were things that I really enjoyed about the customer service aspect of it. It would be too long for here. I think we'll touch on it in some of the other questions, but it's just teach yourself, learn everything, try and take advantage of all that's offered to you. And I had a wonderful person who saw something in me, and she mentored me into the world that I ultimately ended up in. But at the time, interest rates for a new home were 19.5%. I know we freak out over 7 and 8% right now, but it was 19.5% for a new home. And you had to come up with 20% down. So the mortgage desk was a little bit empty, but a savings and loan then had to take applications. So they sat me at a desk so I could take applications. And I just sat there and I taught myself about it. So anyway, it was fun.
Yeah, that's my point. Finance is fun. Finance is fun.
It is.
I love that. I hope we're going to touch later on, I think, about, you mentioned that you had a mentor or someone that kind of helped you through that. And you said she, and, if she was working in finance back then, she must have been one of there weren't very many of us. Let's say that.
There were not. And banking's always been an interesting industry. And there are a lot of corporate positions that have been 2 tiers. There's in the old days of the 70s and 80s, the secretarial pool, and then the CEO C-suite offices. And that was a glass ceiling. Women were not breaking through that. But I was hired by a woman who was in HR at the time, and she was a vice president in the bank and worked for a branch manager who had gone the same career path I had. She had been in retail, large department stores, ran large departments, and ultimately ended up running this branch of this bank. And that was fascinating. So she saw that I was kind of going down the same road, but retail is another career path that had demands on it at the time that were not family oriented, it was a very difficult, cutthroat. You changed jobs quite often, moved around, gypsy type lifestyle back then. And that was not something I wanted. It wasn't something she wanted either, but she just impressed me. She was smart. She was sharp. She was having fun. And she was just very self-confident and casual at a time where women were, that was hard to find because they weren't finding those positions. And I just remember just really watching her like a young person might, and learned a lot from her. She was great. Having a mentor in your life, having a mentor around you in your career, they don't necessarily mentor you on everything you do, but they're important. And it's not just one. You'll have many throughout. But I find those confidants who are you're not a direct report to, but people that outside looking in, and they're great. Their perspectives are very, very helpful. But you're correct. It was not an easy time for women in any job back then.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So, Cindy, as you look back and you kind of look back over your trajectory and where you came from, is there an investment that you made in yourself that you were like, oh, I'm so glad I did that? That just really made the difference in where I ended up.
Well, at the time, going back and getting my master's, and that's probably my one regret, though I don't anymore, but it was a regret. There was not the ability to take the break and not go to school. There weren't loans available for it at the time. Getting a master's degree was pretty tough. So with that, the banking world offers banking school, which is the equivalent, a semi-equivalent of it at various universities. And the bank invested in me. I jumped at that opportunity. So there were several opportunities over the years to attend University of New Mexico, University of Oklahoma, Southern Methodist University down in Texas. Anytime that was offered, and especially employer paid or partial paid, they were huge to my career. Even later in life, I participated in a program with a large regional bank that for 6 months sent me out to California. And I was out there for a week with a group of people with the credit underwriting group. And it was just a fantastic opportunity. When those come your way, you make it happen. It wasn't easy. I had infants doing some of this. But it was still worth it. And my family supported me in it. So I'm grateful that I did that.
So was it the educational piece or what you learned, or was it the network that you built, or a little bit of everything? Like, what made that such an important investment?
And it was more what I learned. In my industry, there have been deserts where the training wasn't offered. Banks change quite a bit. They get bought by another bank. One fails, one continues, one gobbles up. Not everybody is offered those credit programs. While they were available in the 70s and early 80s, by the 90s, they went away. The early 2000s, they weren't around, and then they started to come back. So it's an evolution of what corporate will invest in. It's, they're looking at their bottom line. Do we have the money to do this? What's interesting about corporate is they look out the window every few decades and realize we don't have the next generation coming forward. That is a serious issue in many industries right now. That's not just banking. There is a definite hole in the system where we didn't train people to come forward. Plus, we have a lot of people staying longer in the workforce. So young people went and found other jobs. It's been a fascinating change, but banking and finance is an interesting area that if you get the opportunity, you take it. Sometimes it can be networking. Definitely when you're doing local programs within your area. Can't recommend enough if for those that have gone to CU Boulder, CU Denver, DU, anybody in Colorado here, they have a network immediately. There are also leadership programs within the various communities that I would strongly recommend within your community. And that's a great way to network. But the type of training I was doing, knowledge I was trying to gain was actual understanding of the financial system, economics, accounting, digging in deeper to risk management. I wanted to understand those things. Too often in many worlds, people become great networkers and business developers if they don't understand what they're selling and how it works and how to relate that, then it's very difficult for them to be consultative to the clients that they're working with. It's digging in and looking at how the sausage is made. I think that is incredibly important. And even to this day, I watch those individuals that that is not their thing and they're not going to do it. And if they can sell and they're business developers and that's what they want to do, more power to them. My sense of security is knowing I can look at financial statements, I can read them, I can understand what's going on in that company. That's big.
I think that's really an important distinction too, is that you have to have a base knowledge, like all the other skills that you need to learn on top of that, like networking and mentoring and all those sorts of how to survive in business and professions. You also need a really deep kind of knowledge or a base set of facts about what you're actually doing. And sometimes, and most times, honestly, I think that college doesn't quite prepare you for everything that you're going to be doing. So some of those programs, you do need the college as well, but some of those programs where they give you the opportunity to go and learn more about your specific industry are pretty good.
The way I look at college for my adult children, for myself and for others on my team, this is the place where you get to experience a lot of different things. You kind of get to talk and get different perspectives on the area of expertise you want to be in, whether that's engineering, medicine, or it's in business. And business encompasses everything. That's the part. It's a very broad stroke of what do you learn. But when you start to understand what you're looking at and kind of get a feel for, I think this is interesting to me. More importantly, you walk out knowing how to learn. Becoming a lifelong self-learner is huge. That way you, as the world changes, which is changing faster every day, especially with technology, you're able to, word got overused during the pandemic, pivot with it, but adjust, go in the direction you want to go and follow the thing that's interesting. You know, they talk about in technology, early adopters. The most fascinating thing for me is the whole cell phone, iPad world was new to me, where I know I work with people. They've never known life without email or without cell phones. But at the same time, the minute it hit, computers hit, whatever it was, dig in, learn. I watched people resist it. And probably those women listening on this podcast have family members, parents, they did not want to. And I get that. But that was not for me. It's something I want to embrace it. I want to learn because these are tools that are going to help me and my team do a better job and better relate to our clients.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that we're seeing some of that now with AI. We're seeing that come into all different industries and it being a brand new kind of cool thing, but also something that you need to learn and get familiar with because it may change.
You want to also understand the pitfalls to it too. And they're there. So yeah, you're right.
Cindy, what is the worst advice that someone ever gave you? And did you take the advice or did you learn from it?
People in a position of trust. I had a high school counselor tell me, you don't want to take college prep courses. You're just going to get married. You're not going to work. That is in a decade where it was stated that way, but there's probably something similar. It's the coach that tells you really can't dance. Yes, you can. So it's worst advice are things that tell you don't. There's cautionary advice. And you and I've talked about cautionary advice. Understand all the risks and rewards in that. But the worst advice was, you don't need college. You don't do this. The other one was my mother, who was a CPA, an accountant, with her 10 key machine. But she says, don't learn to type. They'll just make you a secretary. Today, keyboarding is so important. That was a bad piece of advice. So I had to go back and learn that anyway. I think it's evaluate what everybody is throwing at you. The thing I taught my children was don't take advice from someone you wouldn't trade places with. That's a big, if their situation or their understanding or how they're managing things, that's not for you, then don't be very wary of that advice. And that's the easiest way, I think, to gauge some of that. Because bad advice, you're going to get it all the time. It's always out there. There are bosses that will have judgments of you, performance appraisals and valuations from people who are maybe someone you're not thrilled about working for, and then you get your employee evaluation. They didn't see you for who you really were. Don't take that personally. Just understand, where did it come from? How do I manage that? And how do I manage myself to what do I want? What's better for me? And bring that forward. Just don't take everything at face value.
Oh, I really like that. I like the idea too of like, if you wouldn't trade places with them, don't take that advice because you do ask, well, at least I do. I ask advice from just about everyone. What would you do about this? What would you do about this? But if I don't want to be in their life or do what they're doing, or they're not on the same trajectory than I'm at, then sometimes you have to kind of take that with a grain of salt. Good thinking. What do you have something that you look back on and you're like, I wish I would have done that differently? It's not, I call them learning experiences. Some people call them regrets. But is there something that if you could go back, knowing what you know now, you would have handled it differently?
I think the only thing that has come to mind at times are when I let emotions lead versus my brain. I get frustrated. Who doesn't? We all get frustrated. We get angry. I joke that I'm the hot-headed Irish Italian and my hands start waving. It's be careful. I pull myself back. It's learning that self-restraint, that email you send off right away. Don't, especially in emails. It's a great place to you want to let somebody else know in the organization, this didn't work. This person did this went wrong. The customer didn't get what they needed. This is something we have to fix. When you're in the heat of the moment, write it. Don't put an address on the email. Write it out. Always write the draft, whether it's verbally or it's in an email or on paper. Write the draft and set it aside and give it a few hours, if not overnight, 24 hours. It can wait. You are better off looking at it later when cooler heads prevail, rewriting it and looking for the other advice I give people is look for the win-win. The world today in the outer world is all about win-lose. It's opposites. It's constant friction. And it's like you can't find the common ground if you don't look for the win-win. And the win-win's not always easy, but when you start to learn to write that way, speak that way, think that way, slow yourself down, set it aside, and then come back and tell that friend, I didn't like how you handled that. I didn't appreciate you saying that to me. To that boss, I didn't appreciate you circumventing me and telling the customer it was okay to do this when I've done your bidding and told them, no, we can't. It's you undermined me. Those are things to definitely get it off your chest. Don't let it stew. It's really something it made you react. It made you feel. Write it down, but then sit on it and then rethink it and look for the win-win. How do I present this I thank you for empowering the customer and helping them get done what they needed to get done. I also want to talk about the fact that I felt like that potentially made me look bad. How can I do this? And you and I work together so I can find the win-win for the customer the next time. And when we're building networks and relationships, we want that. But that's where you be wary of those people who don't have your best interests in place because they set you up for that. That's the other thing to look at because sometimes it's not your fault. You got set up in that one. So now how do I avoid that going forward? How do I look for what was my control in that situation? But just shooting it off and letting them know you may fully be in the right and they are in the wrong. But if they're the person in power and you are not, by getting angry, you give them your power. Don't give up your power.
That's really interesting. I've done that a couple of times where I've written a long email or text or something like that, and I'm definitely going to right this wrong that has been done. I'm hot-headed, and then I'll let it fester in my drafts for a day or so. And when I come back and look at it again, I'm like, oh, that probably wouldn't have went over very well. I'm so glad I waited.
It only takes sending one to the wrong person to learn. And that happens. And I have in my youth said something that probably was out of turn. Yes, I was right. I still think I'm right today, but I had a boss tell me it doesn't matter. You need to go fix that.
And I think that the idea of win-win situation, we're all trying to build relationships, build networks, work with different people in different industries, and that idea of how can I help them win as well. I think that's a powerful thing.
In banking, the best one is the overdraft, the example. Nobody likes finding out they bounced a check at the bank, right? And in the days before online banking, it meant that you came home from work on Friday night, a long week, you're trying to get dinner on the table, and you open up your mail and there's the NSF, the overdraft notice at your bank, and you have to stew on that. And if you can't see it online and figure out what caused it, you have to stew on that until Monday morning. Monday morning, the first person they call are the customer service representatives, back then called tellers, who have the least amount of control in the situation. And it's like us yelling at the cell person or, whoever, the utility company. But we're talking to the lowest common denominator in that position. But what I told the staff that were in that position, don't take it personally. They're calling, they're upset. So if you put yourself in their position, the win is, I know how upset you are. Let's see if we can figure out what it is. And that's when you get to kind of win it over. Today, it's the same thing. It's a business owner. It's their business. They're trying to make payroll. They're scared to death. We're just telling them, this is our rules. This is our policies. That doesn't feel good. Let's talk it through, get the right people in the process and try and help them. It just makes you better at customer service, but it also makes you feel better, because if you're able to find them that win, they are loyal to you for life.
Yeah. Yeah. And it makes you a better human, like a better part of this world, right? To look for wins and look for ways to collaborate and help people. I love that. That's the part I love most, right? If you could go back and talk to yourself at the beginning of this journey, I think it's funny that you said that you had, your high school counselor or whatever was telling you that you're not going to go to college, you're just going to get married anyway. So, so I think that, how would you go back and talk to that younger woman as she started on this journey? What would you tell her? What would you tell your 20-year-old self?
I think the biggest thing is all it does is reinforce imposter syndrome, which hearing a speaker talk about imposter syndrome, it's been so labeled to women, but it's not, it's men too. It just happened to be, I guess, the first study out of Finland or wherever it was. They studied women only. So that's how it got labeled as. I'm like, thanks. But imposter syndrome to anybody. The thing that I look at with a 20-something is that feeling of not being good enough, but you are, and note that you are, but it's asking good questions. It's taking good notes. It goes back to the self-learning. It's just taking in everything you possibly can as a sponge and learning from it, understanding of what you want to do, and move forward. Understand the job you're looking for. If it's the high school counselor and I know I want to go to college, I researched the colleges. I had support at home. I found the support elsewhere. It was just what I was learning to do very young was advocate for myself. I need this. I need that. Okay, that may be what you're doing and what you want to say, but I really do need English, this level. I need the second level of that class, and I need history. I need this. Whatever it was that was part of the college transcripts requirements and application requirements, and just kind of blew him off. So I didn't chose not to listen to him.
I think the idea of advocating for yourself is really important and powerful too. I had another one that I was interviewing, another woman said basically nobody cares about your career, your trajectory, your life as much as you do. So stand up and make sure that you're advocating for you.
Yep.
So as you started down the road, what scared you the most when you started your career? And does it still scare you, or did you learn how to deal with it?
Networking, losing my job, not making my goals. I'm failing. Failure is scary. If you haven't experienced a lot of failure, and we all do, but failure where? I mean, school, I had been successful at school. So failure was not something in that area that I was fully comfortable with. But all of a sudden having sales goals, that kind of thing, that was a little nerve wracking for me. It would have been very easy to fall back into just processing paperwork. In my world, you can be a credit analyst, you can be a loan administration person. Those are great places to be. But I knew I wanted to do more for the customers and the clients. So it was just taking the time that it takes to learn how to do what I do and push myself into it. But losing my job was a big one, and it's hit every time we hit a recession. Layoffs were a big part of the 80s, and they still are. We see layoffs going on now. And that was a concern. What it finally came back to was imagining what I would do if everything changed. And that's where resilience comes from. And that's where some of the books that I read, which are not straight business books, it's looking at resilience, what it takes to do something different. When you can start to imagine doing something different and not being attached to one set of standards that you put yourself under, I think you become more resilient that way. If you're really afraid of something and it's something you shouldn't be doing because it's not your strength, why are you making yourself do it? I went through a period of, I was going to challenge myself to ride roller coasters. And I'm like, okay, I did several of those all over a summer. It's like, I think I'm done. I don't need to do that anymore because I don't care. I didn't get that much of a thrill out of it. I got over the fear, sorta, but it's like, I'm not going to do that anymore. That's not my thing. So give yourself permission to quit.
That is super important, I think. I will read a book I don't like all the way through to the very end because I refuse to quit halfway through. Even though it doesn't add anything to my life, it doesn't do anything for me. I still have a hard time quitting. I think that's super powerful, Cindy. The idea that you have your permission to quit something that doesn't fit you.
Go do something else. Change your life. Change everything. It sounds, I'm making it sound easier than it is, but some days you may not have a choice. So if you can imagine something different, and it's like, I always got to have the backup plan. So
yeah, I think that's, I do too, when when I'm trying to make a big decision or try and, we started our company here 7 years ago. And when Sam approached me about coming on, I thought about it and I'm like, well, what's the worst that can happen? And if you go through your worst case scenario and you've got some plan Bs in place, maybe take the risk. Maybe be just a little bit fearless there.
But the flip side of that is it's always fascinating to watch other people and what they're afraid of, and networkers that are afraid of the numbers. And knew a business owner, was a woman business owner, and was scared to death to talk to bankers because they were all men. And she's like, I think I'm expected to know everything in my tax returns. And I'm like, is your business the business of preparing tax returns? She's like, no, you pay a CPA good money for that. You're not expected to know all that stuff. That's what you pay them for. So please don't do that and don't worry about that. So it's really understanding what your role is in the situation. So the same thing for networking. Networking is something that is an interesting place for me. I'm not comfortable in big rooms of people where I don't know everybody, but there are plenty of groups that I'm a part of and build relationships in. and go in the room and I see people that I know, and it's fun to get to know people I don't know. It's learning how to make yourself and where you're comfortable in those situations and why they're important to me. And for me, it was taking a different perspective. I'm not here to sell myself. I'm here to understand what you do, because what I always love having is a list of names of trusted advisors. My clients are always looking at, who do you know? Let me introduce you to this person, because I've gotten to know them. I have confidence in them. I would love for you to have a chance to talk to them. Maybe they can help.
I like that.
So I'm going and gathering intel for my clients, if you will. It's a different perspective on it.
I like that. I like that you faced your fear on the roller coasters too, and then decided you didn't really, that was okay, that you'd done it and you didn't need to do it again and over and over and over again. So
that is correct. It's like watching I don't watch scary movies. I don't need to scare myself. Life is scary enough. I scare myself in different ways.
So did you run into any unique challenges because you were a woman?
Well, probably all too young here, but if anybody have seen the movie Charlie Wilson's War, it's a fascinating film. It's on how the situation in the Middle East for this country that is still happening today, but very fascinating time when the Middle East was an upset and the U.S. got involved. But it also talks about the 80s, and this is a congressman in his office, and how he runs his office is just appalling. It's young women, and he hires them for their looks, not for their ability to type. He's like, I can teach them how to type. I can't teach them how to be pretty. So he uses more crass language than that. But that was the world of 1980. It's exactly where it was. They could hire you for whatever reasons. They could ask you about your family planning choices. They could ask you about when you were planning on getting pregnant, when you were getting married. It was a very different world. There was also huge difference, unequal pay for same work, unfair treatment, inappropriate behavior, bad behavior, and the mommy penalty. All those things were real. The 90s worked very hard, and the 2000s have worked very hard to bridge a lot of that. And a lot of different ideas came about. There was job sharing for a while. There were different things. And I think the world has evolved into something better. Family leave acts that we have now for us. The biggest thing is understanding what it is to have a family and how to coordinate that and how to coordinate your career. Don't convince yourself that you have, it was the saying of you can have it all. No, you really can't have it all. Neither can your significant other who's in it with you. It is a village. And it's a partnership. And if everybody comes together to make that work, which is not what was happening several generations before, the generation was very gender specific as to who took care of what. I love watching families now. I mean, everybody jumps in and is responsible for driving the kids to whatever sports event, or helping with home duties, or helping with the things you need, taking care of finances. So it kind of goes all over. It's the partnership that you create. If you create that partnership outside of work, hopefully you have the support you need inside work. The judgments within the workplace, are they still there subtly? Yes, they are. They always, we're still talking about it. You asked me the question, that's because we're still dealing with it. Or the question wouldn't be a question. But I think if you lower the expectations of what being the perfect person in that position is, and you have partnership with your partner, the employers are trying as hard as they can to work with you, especially in times of low unemployment. We're experiencing that here in Colorado. They're trying to make accommodations. But keep in mind, as the society gives more support to the family needs to come back and support society, support the employer, support the job, because they're the one that created the job for you in the first place. And if they go away, now what do you do? So it's not taking advantage of it, which was done certainly when I was a mom. I watched it happen. So it goes back to the win-win. But yes, faced much of it. It was difficult. made it work, feared my kids were ruined forever. I kept telling them what they could say on Oprah because I'm sure they were going to be there. But it's also realigning and lowering your standard. The house didn't have to be perfect and clean all the time. Those kinds of things. But how many young people still talk about their moms gathering up everything in their room and putting it in a garbage bag and putting it away, and they had to earn it back? That conversation lately has been come up several times over cleaning the house. I think it comes with cleaning desks, but whatever. I just laugh that it's a thing.
So you were getting messaging when you first started out, like, don't bother, just get married, don't work. Why did you decide to not listen to that and like go to work?
Well, I was raised by a single mom who taught me don't rely on anyone else. You rely on yourself. So self-reliance was a big part of what I was brought up with. And divorce was prevalent, latchkey, kids was prevalent. And so becoming self-reliant. But the other side of that was personally within my own home situation. I knew when I wanted kids. I married a wonderful man who was in the law enforcement world. And that meant a requirement completely different than the normal mom and dad come home at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock at night, go to work at 8 o'clock in the morning, and everybody goes to school. There was nothing traditional about the household. So there are a lot of single parents out there, a lot of blended families, a lot of different schedule situations. I went into having children kind of fearless that I can do this by myself. And this is funny, what you would tell your 20-something self and what I would tell other 20-somethings. Be prepared. Be prepared to do this on your own. If you want children enough, be prepared to do it on your own. Hopefully you never, ever have to. But that's a whole nother podcast and another hour. Not always by choice do you find yourself doing it on your own. And that's where getting that education now, but also continuing it, allows your career to advance. And the world is a better place that it's more supportive, but the better you are at what you do, the more in demand you are, the more they're willing to make concessions. So be your best self.
Yeah. Yeah. That's important. I think that's powerful to think that, it may not be our own choice, but there are a lot of people out there doing it by themselves.
Well, and a lot of, you'll hear talk, and I still hear employers, we made the choice that we wouldn't live in the big house so-and-so could stay home with a kid. It's like, that wasn't even in the works for us. Public servants don't make a lot of money. So the financial if I waited financially, and you hear this all the time, if I'd waited financially, I never would have had kids. But interestingly enough, the generation of my adult children, many have made that decision. Financially, we can't pull it off with the student debt. So there are many, many different reasons. And that I feel terrible, I feel terrible for them, but it's making that personal choice. It's just being prepared to do it through, see it through and do it on your own. And it can be done. It can be done. And they do survive.
Cindy, when you look at your life, what are you the most proud of?
My kids. My kids. I mean, I'm proud of the person I've become. I decided not to scare myself with roller coasters, but I decided at the age of 50, my daughter and I are very involved in the equine world, and I started jumping horses at a late place in life. I had ridden only a little during my youth. I always wanted to. I was able to follow my dream at a very late place in life, and I'm following that dream. But I have that opportunity with something I do with my adult daughter, but both my kids. I'm very proud of that, but I'm also I am very proud of the clients that I work with. They are family also. They're friends. They're businesses that I help some of them through some crises and had some very tough times in making sure they made it through. So I'm proud that I'm able to work in an industry with banks that do that. Not all banks do.
I think that's neat. I think that sometimes people don't realize what a close relationship you build with clients. I have clients we've visited in the hospital. I have ones that I call and make sure that their tests came back okay after a cancer scare or something like that. And they do emotionally, and they feel a lot like family. And I think that think that's important to realize. We're proud of them. We're proud when they have success. We're excited.
Yep. Well, it's community, and business is a community. If you're in business, it depends. And you know your community of which the world you're in, that's kind of what you look to.
So any advice for a young woman who's just starting down your path? She wants to go into banking. She wants to go into commercial lending. What would you tell someone who's just starting on that?
The finance degree is huge. No accounting. You can even have your bachelor's in whatever you have it in, but go to a junior college and take accounting. Accounting's fascinating, if that's your thing. Sales, there are different ways to go into banking, but it is harder to promote into the loan side from the customer service side. It can be done, but that's a longer trajectory. If this was someone young right now who was looking at being an intern in a bank, and we have one right now, start learning how to read the financials. And is it their thing that they want to do? No. But if you're good at understanding what you're reading, what you're looking at, what they learn by reading just the financials of that business, they start to understand, well, what does this business do? And I'll take it down a real quick tangent. Looking at a balance sheet, when you're trying to figure out how they make their money, what we talk about in banking, follow the dollar. The only thing that repays a loan is cash. Nothing else repays a loan. So when people talk about, I have plenty of collateral, I have real estate, I have equipment, none of that pays it back until you convert it to cash. That's why there's second and third sources of repayment. But if you're looking at the cash flow of that business, understand what you're going to see. And it gets very technical from there. But what I watch these young people that are becoming credit analysts, what they're learning is, how does Lori, the financial planner, make her money versus Susie, who is a manufacturer and she is manufacturing t-shirts. How does she make her money? There is investment in fabric and equipment, and where for you, it's an investment in knowledge and database and a lot of technology in your world. In their world, not as much. So I'm constantly giving out those analogies. But for a young person doing that, when they get into those positions, anytime you can intern or take a position where you're learning the inner workings of that area, that's a big one, because that's a great way to find, is this really what I want to do? So I think it's take advantage. This goes back to finding the mentor, finding the people in the organization and what they do, understanding who is that person sitting over there and what are they doing and why do they like their job? Is that something I want to do? If you have a strong sense of, I know I want to be an attorney, and the type of attorney I want to be is in environmental crimes or legislation, that's where I want to do climate change, then what you're doing is you're going back to school, you're getting that law degree and taking those courses, but you're looking for the right firms to intern with. If you are looking at if you're looking to going into banking, you're looking for the opportunities of banks that have educational opportunities within the banks themselves. You can ask about that in an interview. A lot of them will tell you about getting your college degree and they've got tuition reimbursement, but do they go a step beyond that? And certainly I have worked with people that started as simple as tuition reimbursement and went back, got their master's, and they then went through the credit analyst route, learned how to read and put it all together. And now they're out doing what I'm doing, helping business owners. I just had to do it a couple decades longer because I had to learn the hard way.
Yeah, I love myself a good financial sheet. So I agree with that. I think that although I do take issue with the fact you said it may not be fun, finance is fun. Looking at the financial planning sheets is super fun. But
for those of us who like it, there are others.
Yeah, I do get that there are people that don't. Exactly.
But make sure you're not in a job that requires that of your that you have to have that skill and that knowledge. Because if you don't have a passion for it, I did not walk into this job with that knowledge or skill, and I didn't know I had a passion for it until somebody taught me how to build a spreadsheet. I got all excited. So,
yeah, that's another thing that's super fun and exciting. Yeah. So, Cindy,
anyway.
thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you telling us a little bit about your journey and the things that you've done. If we have listeners that want to get in touch with you or learn more, how do they do that?
They can find me on LinkedIn. Certainly there. They can always reach out to Mountain View Bank of Commerce and find me there. I don't know if they're welcome to email me. All of that should be either through the bank or on LinkedIn, but I am more than happy to talk to them, especially if they're looking at digging in deeper to what a career in this field looks like. I'm happy to talk about it.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thanks, Cindy. I appreciate your time.
Lori, thank you. Appreciate it.